Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and it is bulking season for the tiger bass here in the 5-acre pond. And this year we have grown some record-sized freshwater prawns that have even exceeded my expectations. And today we've got some exciting things coming up with them, including feeding some to the tiger bass. And this is our third year raising these freshwater prawns, and it's been by far the most productive. Look at the size of some of these colossal shrimp. And these bigger prawns with the longer pinchers are males, and their pinchers can sometimes grow twice their body length. But the beauty of these prawns is that in about 4 months they can reach adult size and are basically the equivalent of a jumbo shrimp. And some of the adults can exceed 12 inches in length. And the main reason we're stocking these in the 5-acre pond is because we can't add crawfish in there because they would burrow through the pond dam. And as you can see, these jumbo prawns are a huge protein snack for the bass. And a big reason that these bass went from 2 inches long to some of them pushing 7 pounds in less than 3 years. But our growing season starts in the spring, and this year we stocked them in 4 different bodies of water. And we started right here at the top of Cedar Falls in what we call the wetland filter. And so we put underwater cameras in the wetland filter throughout the year, and it's fun to watch how the prawns and bass interact together. And the second place we stock them is in the 20,000-gallon main body of water called Cedar Falls. And it has plenty of rocks and boulders and hideout places for some of those prawns to survive. And the third place we added them was in the 5-acre pond, and you'll be very surprised at some of the prawns you see here in this pond, coming up here in just a minute. And then the last place we like to raise them is in a holding tank, and I like this method because I can control all the variables, and it has 0 predators, giving them a much higher survival rate. But each year we start out with 5,000 to 7,000 post-larva prawns. They require brackish water to reproduce, but once they reach that post-larva stage, they can survive in 100% fresh water. And these are some clips of us when we stocked them earlier in the spring. Most of them were tiny, not even an inch long. And today I was over at the 5-acre pond and was pretty surprised when I saw a big adult-sized prawn hanging out right here in this vegetation. And I wasn't sure if any of these would survive to get that big because of all of the bass in the pond. But we added 2,000 of them in the shallow pockets, and I think a handful of them were able to stay hidden long enough to become adults. This is a female, and you can tell by the orange on the belly, which are eggs. But as I mentioned, they can't reproduce here in these freshwater ponds, so that's why we have to restock them each year. But they remind me a lot of tilapia because they're constantly feeding and working through any kind of algae and debris, picking up whatever kind of meal they can. But every year we have people ask why we go through the process of raising these prawns. And the main reason is because we can't have crawfish in the 5-acre pond because they would burrow holes through the clay liner. And crawfish are one of the main staples in a bass's diet. And for smallmouth bass, they're one of their preferred food choices. But prawns also have much more protein. A crawfish has a small tail with just a little bit of meat in it, while over 50% of the mass on a prawn is pure protein for these fish. And we spotted our next adult prawn up here at the wetland filter, and usually around the fall we'll start seeing them come out during the daytime here. But I think it's mostly because they've gotten big enough and they no longer fear Truman, the small bass that we have in this pond. But the wetland filter is one of the best spots to grow the prawns because although it looks shallow, it's actually around 8 feet deep, and we filled about 6 feet of that up with gravel. And the water from the main body of the pond gets pumped up and filtered through all that gravel before it washes back down the waterfall. And that produces a constant food source for the prawns. And I think that's the reason they seem to grow a little bit bigger here. Look at Truman giving him the stare down. If you would have caught him earlier on in life, you might could have eaten him, but now I think he's about as big as you are and there's no chance. But today we're going to catch some of these out of the wetland filter to feed to the bass. But catching them when they're this big has turned out to be difficult because they no longer fit in the crawfish traps. Folks, got some good news. I finally figured out how to catch some of these jumbo prawns that have been living up here in the wetland filter. I tried using my crawfish traps, but I think some of them were too big to even fit in the crawfish trap. So what I did is put out some mesh netting right there up against that log, and I left this side open, and you can see I baited them in with pieces of ham. And I'd leave that corner of the net open, wait a couple hours, let them come in and start feeding. Then I snuck right up there, dropped that last piece of the net. And so there's several big prawns right here in this small little area. And look at how big some of these guys are. That one right there in the middle is a jumbo. But guys, I hope I can still catch the one I just saw down there because he's the biggest one we've ever grown out here. All right, guys, I caught him, but he won't let go of the lilies. Look at the size of that jumbo prawn right there. I don't want to pull him out of there and break his claw off. Got him. Look at the size of that. That is a lobster. Ooh, he's about, his pincher's so long it can almost reach back there and get me. Look at that. Man, what a giant freshwater prawn. So even though the bass could probably eat some of the bigger males, I've got a better idea, and I think we're going to save some of them for the 300-gallon aquarium. So we'll do a quick feeding with some of the smaller prawns, and we'll start out by feeding some of these bass right here in Cedar Falls. And this is what you would consider a full-size adult female, which looks pretty big, but I bet you most of the bass in here would turn that into a prawn snack. Alright, we're going to drop this one in right here at the intake bay. But check that out, one of the smallest bass that was just born in this pond is one of the first ones to come up and check him out. Oh, but look who showed up. I believe that's one of the pair of bass that we call Johnny and June. Got him. And if you notice, the bass always eat crawfish and prawns tail first. It's much easier for them to digest it that way, and sometimes they'll even poke at them and try to remove their pinchers before they eat them. But that'll be a full meal for this bass today. You can even see it swimming around with the pinchers hanging out of its mouth. It's going to take it a while to digest that one. Alright, we got another adult female here, and today we're going to attempt the first ever hand feeding a prawn to a bass out here at the farm. Oh, he missed him at first, and then came right back and got him, and headed up under the dock. Alright, we're going to add some over here in the beach area. Let's see how this turns out. Oh, the first one to show up is one of those smaller bass. And then one of the bigger bass shot in there and got him. At first I thought that was Spot because it had some lighter colors, but it doesn't have that big white spot on top of it. And I think that may be one of the first bass that were born in this pond that we call Eve. Just like the other one, swimming around with the pinchers hanging out. It almost makes them look like a catfish. And they grew some whiskers. Alright, we're over here at the 300-gallon aquarium. I kept 4 of the biggest males. We're going to try to keep them in this aquarium. You can see those two are roughly the same size. There's the big jumbo right there. But what I'm going to do is slowly add some of the aquarium water into their holding tanks and get them acclimated. Alright, got them acclimated. Let's see how they like their new home. Dropping the first guy in. He's sinking down to the bottom. And you know, these really are cool looking creatures. Almost a mix between a crawfish and a lobster. But I love their patterns with those vibrant blue colors. But this little guy's checking out the bottom. We may end up adding some more places for these guys to hide. Alright, going in with number 2, and these guys are pretty much twins, almost identical in length and size, headed back over there to reunite again. But I can already tell that putting some in the aquarium was a great idea, because you can see so much more in here, and it's looking like they have roughly 10 additional legs, and some of those also have those tiny pinchers, and I'm guessing maybe they use the small pinchers to eat with, and maybe the bigger ones to defend themselves. And then check out all those little flappers in the back. Alright, now it's time to go in with the big boy. The big, colossal, jumbo freshwater prawn. Not sure with prawns if it's genetics or this guy just eats more than the rest of them. But he's also got those really cool blue patterns on his tail. And they also have that big pointer that points right off the top of their head, right in between their eyes. And last but not least, the smallest of the bunch. We'll call him the runt. But it didn't take them long to settle into their new home. It does look like they're using those smaller pinchers, picking stuff out of the substrate to eat. And just like everything else out here at the farm, I'm going to let you guys name them. So we got a big jumbo prawn, 2 twins, and the runt. You guys leave me some comments down below on what you think we should name them. And I don't know, maybe we'll do some experiments here in this aquarium coming up. Could potentially even try to turn it into a brackish water aquarium and add some females and see if we can get them to reproduce and have an unlimited supply of prawns out here. That'd be pretty cool. We all know that dogs are a man's best friend, so today we're on a mission to help you feed your pup top quality, healthy food. But as you all know, not all dog food is created the same. That's why we only use a dog food called Sundays. Sundays for Dogs is a fresh dog food made from a short list of ingredients, including 100% meat, muscle, organs, and superfoods, with 0 synthetics or artificial preservatives. But the best part about Sundays is the dogs love it. We fed it to every dog that visits the farm, and they all couldn't get enough of it. So if you have a picky dog, no worries, I'm confident they'll like it. And since Sundays puts all their dog food through an air drying process to preserve the flavor and nutrition, it doesn't require refrigeration or preparation, just pour and serve. It's made with high quality ingredients like beef, chicken, turkey, pumpkin, and premium fish oils, so it's full of flavor. They've also designed the bag with a Velcro seal that makes it very easy to store away and keeps it fresh. And Sundays was founded and ran by a veterinarian that spent years getting the recipe dialed in, and they ship it directly to your door. So if you're interested in trying them out, go to sundaysfordogs.com/BamaBass40 and you can get 40% off your first order. So go check out Sundays for Dogs and let's keep them pups happy and healthy, folks. Alright, now let's head back over to Cedar Falls. We've had a lot of action going on over here this week, including a bird takeover. It's been so hot, these guys don't want to leave the watering hole for too long. But I was over here at the base of the waterfall today, and I always enjoy seeing some of those little bass fry that have survived. This little guy hatched in March or April, and is probably about 3 inches long now. But speaking of new life in the pond, over here in the intake bay, we have a little small group of baby tilapia. These little guys have gotten big enough, and they're on their own now. Most of you saw this clip several weeks back, where the tilapia was using a mouth brooding technique to protect all the young. So anytime the bass would come around, they would all swim into her mouth and she'd move them to a different area. But you know me, I had to put some cameras underwater. I wanted to see just how good these small tilapia were at hiding without their parents' help. But it's almost like they had perfect instincts when they scattered off because they knew trouble was coming. But just like those tilapia, the bass also have instincts and typically know exactly where their next meal is hiding out. And I wouldn't think a bass of this size would be that interested in a tiny tilapia. But it definitely looks like this guy's keying in on them and trying to have a little snack. And here's another good underwater shot of those tiny bass. And I love seeing these little guys. It makes me happy when we have a successful bass spawn. But this pond is getting overpopulated with bass. Eventually we're going to have to move some of these to a different body of water. But look who it is, the turtle showed up, and I'm starting to wonder if this is one of those ninja turtles that we moved from our old backyard pond and put in the 5-acre pond. It looks a lot like him, definitely think it could be. And we got a tilapia cruising by. And here comes Tiger. Man, he is getting big. And look who's following him around, Smalley the smallmouth bass. So happy to see him survive through the summertime. Looks like he's adapting well. Alright, now let's head over to the 5-acre pond where there's always plenty of action. And this week I wanted to get some overhead shots of the bluegill feeders going off. We've seen a lot of videos from the feeder point of view, but let's see how things look overhead. And today we got a big mixture of bluegills, tilapia, turtles, and some big bass mixed in there. And it's like the fish have an internal timer and know exactly when the feeders are going to go off. But you see a bird just flew over and spooked that bass. And that's a result of living around ospreys and eagles your whole life. But alright, now the feeder's about to go off, and it's always so chaotic. You gotta try not to focus on any one thing, because if you do, you'll miss several other things, with so much happening at once. The bluegills and tilapia are frantically feeding as fast as they can to get as many pellets as they can in a short amount of time. The turtles are lost, not sure what's really going on, and the bass are knocking the bluegills up into the air, looking for that next easy meal. But I always have to watch these videos a time or two, because the majority of the time, you missed something on the first take. So let's see how many of you saw this guy come up from out of the deep water and completely swing and miss on a bluegill. And that's a big female bass. But not only did it miss once, there's a good look at strike number 2. Knocking that one up in the air, but missed it also. And it was a bad day for this big female, as there's strike 3. No luck during this feeding. But as always, some of those biggest female bass hanging out right here around the feeder. And I actually catch one of them later in this video. And we got some more birds flying over here, spooking all the bass. That's that survival instinct kicking in. But you'll also notice that there's several big tilapia mixed in. I found that later in the season, especially once the tilapia get as big as the bass, they're no longer scared of them, and sometimes we'll even push them and bully them out of their area. But this angle just shows you how easy of a target these white tilapia are to any bird that flies over like an eagle or osprey. Alright, we got some good news, and today we're going to be running fiber out here to the farm. These guys got a cool machine that trenches the hole and installs the fiber cable at the same time. That's pretty cool. But you may be asking the question, why is fiber good news? And that's because this tiny little blue cable opens up a world of possibilities. With the biggest being that we can now live stream all of the wildlife cameras out here at the farm. And there's so many neat opportunities that come with that. Like putting a live stream camera up in the eagle nest this year before they move in and lay eggs. Because how cool is it going to be being able to hop on and check on the baby eagles at any time. We're also going to have underwater cameras live streaming in both Cedar Falls and the 5-acre pond. And one of the things I've been working on this week is testing out different camera locations to see which ones have the most action. Because the last thing we all want to watch is a live feed with no activity. But I'm only out at the farm a small portion of the time and only capture a fraction of what happens out here on camera. So us just being able to watch these wildlife feeds 24/7, we're probably all going to see some really cool stuff happen. And the last time I did this was 5 or 6 years ago in the backyard pond, and I'd always find it so interesting because late at night I'd go back through and read the comments, and people would leave a timestamp. For instance, one time a frog jumped in the pond and Bonnie ate it. And I would have never known that those type of things happened had it not been for you guys watching the live stream. But this is something I'm really excited about because just sitting back and watching these fish and wildlife in their natural habitats, we're guaranteed to see some really cool and fun stuff. Just like a couple weeks ago, the does had their first fawns, and most of the day you can see the little baby hopping around while Mama teaches her life. And I can tell this doe's going to have some trouble coming because curiosity has taken over this little fawn. And I've seen glimpses of this one's personality, and it's not always listening to Mama. So I think we're going to name this little guy Curious George. But he's not the only one around. Another doe just had twins, and that's the second time we've had twin fawns out here. But I've had a tough time figuring out this little guy, and he's too big to be a fawn, and my guess is that he's a 1-year-old and was born last year, but he acts a lot like a fawn because he just cruises around the farm throughout the day, not scared of people at all, and when I pull up in the vehicle, he doesn't seem to mind at all. So my guess is he's just a young, friendly deer, not really scared of anything. Alright, now here's a good underwater shot here of all the bass at Cedar Falls. And I'm not going to lie, some of them are getting so big, at times it's hard to tell who's who. For me, it's easy to tell Moby, Spot, and Smalley. But now I think Johnny and June, Tiger, and even Eve have gotten so big, it's easy to misidentify them. And the reason they're all huddled up here is because now it's feeding time. So a couple more things on the live stream. One of the things that we've been working on is setting up the cameras and creating some software that'll automatically swap over throughout the day. For instance, each of the bluegill feeders goes off 3 times a day at 9, 12, and 4. So what we would like to do is have the stream automatically swap over and catch the pellet feedings, because again, the goal is to have as much action on the live stream as possible. And we also have some other engineering concepts we would like to build. For instance, some wildlife feeders that are controlled by you guys. So let's just say that we're watching the deer cam at night and there's not really much activity, so we want to build something that would allow you guys to trigger when the feeder would go off, keeping those deer and other wildlife around. Now with the deer and wildlife feeders, we can handle a lot higher volume of food requests than we could in the ponds, because the one thing you can't do in a pond is overfeed the fish, because if the fish don't eat the pellets, it can end up harming the water quality. So we may set it up to allow a few fish feedings throughout the day, triggered from you all, but most of those will probably be the wildlife feeders. We also got to finish writing some software that'll allow you guys to toggle through the cameras, and also figure out the best way to control that so that people aren't just constantly toggling back and forth. But again, the possibilities of this are endless. If you guys have any other ideas, leave them in a comment down below, because next week we should have all the camera feeds up and ready to start streaming live. And we're probably also going to stream across multiple platforms, so if you prefer other streaming services, you can probably watch us on there. Alright, we're here at the new backyard pond, and Oliver caught his first bluegill out of here a couple weeks ago, and now that's his favorite thing to do. But the bluegills are so big in this pond, he has to hold on for dear life because they almost pull him and the rod in.
I got popped up.
Oh, here he goes. He's taking it. Reel it, Bubba. Reel it. You got him. Look at there. He's a big one, ain't he? Don't let him pull the rod in. Goodness. What you got, buddy? He's so big, ain't he? Keep reeling. Oh, yeah, you got a big one, buddy. Oh, you still got him? Pick him up. Yeah, look at that. Wow, he's a big one.
I'm touching.
All right, careful. Look at there, buddy. You caught a really big one.
Bye-bye, fish.
Bye-bye.
I'm going.
Look at him, he's got that technique dialed in. He bends over and uses his legs to help squeeze that rod. He said, I'm not losing my rod and reel. You gotta love it. And if you missed our last video, we set up a wildlife charcuterie board with nuts and seeds and fruits. And it didn't take long for the birds to start popping in, enjoying the new selection of food. But the star of the show was this little squirrel. He's a menace. And we also had a pair of blue jays stop in for a quick bite. And then some cardinals came through and ate till their little bellies were full. But that's not something you see very often. The squirrel's still down here eating at night. But he's not the only one lurking around at night. We also got Mr. Raccoon that I was kind of surprised to see. And he would have just passed on by had it not been for the jam. I've always heard that raccoons have a thing for sweets, so he had to hop up here and inspect it. But I'm afraid we're going to have to adjust our food portions if this little guy keeps coming around. Because if he's anything like the raccoons at the farm, they can knock out some food quick. And you can see that he stuck his nose down in the jam because the little seeds are even sticking to the end of it. And look at the disappointment on this one's face the next morning. He said, all we got left are scraps. But as I mentioned, this little guy was the star of the show last time, and he has a big personality and an even bigger appetite. He stayed up here almost the whole day, eating until he was about to pop. But I love animals and wildlife like this that have so much character and personality. He even crawls inside of the nut bar to eat. But I asked you all to help me name him in the last video, and Cliff Bradley says, name the squirrel Rover after Mark Rober, who made the best squirrel videos with the Squirrel Olympics. And I've seen those and they're pretty incredible to watch. So I feel like that's a fitting name. We'll call this guy Rover. So over the past couple of years, I've had several people reach out asking about our pit tagging system. So I teamed up with UID to create a Crimson Oak pit tag kit. And each kit comes with a pit tag scanner, as well as 10 disposable pit tag injectors that each have an individual pit tag preloaded into them. So these are designed for single-use applications, and it's just like a syringe. You pop the lid off of it, and then use it to insert the pit tag into the fish. And they have 4 labels that shows you what your pit tag number is, or you just use the scanner, which will display the pit tag number across the top. So if any of you guys out there with ponds want to start tracking your fish like we do here, I'll put a link down in the video description below. Alright, so we got to see the baby bass in the Cedar Falls pond. Now we also have a few baby bass over here in the 5-acre pond. So I initially saw 2 or 3 of them swimming around right there in the same area, and then I looked back behind them, and it's a whole school of baby bass hanging out back there. Some of them are a little bit harder to see, but it's funny that they're already schooling up and have learned some of those feeding techniques. But there's a good reason all of them are huddled up over here in these shallow pockets. And that's because just like in Cedar Falls, those baby tilapia are hiding out here, doing their best to survive without the parents. But I find it so interesting that you see the same thing happening even though it's 2 completely separate bodies of water. And just like with Cedar Falls, I love seeing these successful bass spawns. It means that you have a healthy pond and ecosystem. But here's a species that I was a little bit puzzled about because it's not one of the fish that we stocked in the pond. But if I had to take a guess, I would say that I think this is called one of those silver-side minnows. They're real slender and almost see-through, but we did see some of those in here back when we shocked the pond in the spring. And my guess, that's what we're seeing here. And today we also had to turn the well pump on to pump some fresh water into this pond. And that's the first time we've had to do that in a long time. But we're at that time of year in September where it's hot. And you can see here on the bank how much water we lost. So pumping some of that back in. Alright, we got some college football games on. I'm going to show you all a good recipe for a football Saturday. Some Cajun boiled peanuts. Going to start out by adding some Cajun seasoning. Then we're going to add some salt. Next up we need some spice. I like to use dried chilies. And last but not least, some cayenne peppers. And this time of year is perfect because you can get raw green peanuts, which really cut down on the amount of time you got to boil them. Just had some showers come through, soaking the peanuts for me, but we almost got that water to a boil. Had to drop them in and boil them for 1 to 2 hours. Even though we had some showers roll through, the burner's still going. Let's go. So after a couple hours, start sampling the peanuts. You'll know when they're ready whenever the peanut is soft. But the biggest key to boiling peanuts is the soaking time. After you turn the burner off, you want to let these peanuts soak for at least an hour, because as they're cooling down, that's when they soak in all the juices and flavors. So if you hadn't ever done it, give it a shot. It's a perfect game day snack. Alright, we've had a lot of activity over here at the bluegill feeders this past week, and not just from the fish. We've pretty much got a new permanent resident in one of these blue herons, but if you notice, he drops this little bluegill, which is very uncharacteristic of a heron, and that's because look who's flying in the background, Mr. Bald Eagle. Not just one of them. The pair of them are back in town. They left us for a few months, but now I'm happy to see them back. Every morning and afternoon, whenever the feeders go off, you can see them buzzing down, trying to snag one of these bluegills. But most of the time, they come up empty-handed. And something else that really interests me is how the fish rotate through the feeders throughout the year. Right now, the most popular feeder is the one we call the little feeder, and it has way more activity this time of year than it does in the spring. But we've been seeing some giant blow-ups here, so I'm guessing those bigger bass have moved into this area, and that has to be a record height for that bluegill getting knocked out of the water. That was probably 4 feet. But I've also started seeing some of that data in the fish catches. Some fish that live at different areas of the pond have been getting caught at the little feeder here recently. And that could have something to do with the length of daylight. Maybe the sun shines longer on this bank this time of year, warming the water up, attracting smaller fish, and then maybe the bigger ones move in. I'm not really sure, but that's the reason I love having this data and just tracking how the fish's activity changes throughout the year. We know they're always a good hangout for those big females, but now we're starting to see more of those roaming fish hanging out right here in these community holes. It could also be that their metabolism is so high right now, they have to get those extra meals in. But this week I loved watching the blue herons and eagles battle it out, because every time the heron thought he'd have him an easy meal, the eagle would come in and ruin it. Watch him as he's flying over right now, and the eagle cuts him off. All right, now it's time to test out our new pit tag reader kit. We're going to be using the Bama Bass pit scanner and logging all the fish catches we catch in our database. Let's see if we can catch a big one. Here we go. Got him. Oh yeah, good one. On a pink worm. Nice one. All right, this fish has been caught. 570799. Went in at 2.57 pounds. All right, this fish is named Ukulele, and also one of those fish I was talking about that's hovering around the small feeder now. The past 3 times I've caught it have been right in front of the small feeder. Ooh, got him. Oh, it's a good one. Man, that was awesome. Look at that. Big fish. The bubblegum trick worm. Got the good one. Look at there. That's what I'm talking about. Giant bass. My goodness, what a beauty. And getting to watch him eat it. Man. I cannot believe I've grown something that big. That is a giant. All right, this one's been caught. 570540. Weighing in at 5.79 pounds. Man, what a beautiful fish. Gotta love it. Giant. That's why we do it right there. All right, this big girl is named Yoshi, and it's the 2nd time I've caught her this year, and we also got her during the fish survey back in the spring, but I love seeing how she disappeared after 2023, and then showed back up to be one of the biggest fish in the pond this year. There's one. There we go. Yes, sir. All right, another fish that's been caught. 32301. Weighing in at 1.54 pounds. All right, folks, this fish needs a name. It's the 3rd time I've caught it already. So leave me a comment down below on what you think I should name it. It starts with J and is aggressive. I'm catching it almost once every month. There we go. What we got here? Little guy. Felt kind of odd at first. He's swimming sideways. Alright, this fish has been caught. 569975. In at 2.05 pounds. Alright, this fish is named Cypress, and we actually just caught it on the Cypress road bed, so that's fitting. Here we go. I watched that one eat it. Nice one too. Good looking fish right there. Stocky. Alright, this fish has been caught. 33087. Weighing in at 2.66 pounds. And here we have Delta, a little young bass that's showing some good potential. All right, all the wildlife will be eating good out here at the Crimson Oak Farm. Show you guys what we're feeding them this week. We got a few different varieties of protein, a couple different types of rice bran. One of them's a peanut flavor, the other one's apple flavor. That one back there in the back that's busted open is called the kitchen sink. It's got a little bit of everything in it. This one's new. It's roasted peanuts and whole corn, which we know the deer like, but it also has a sweet taste to it. And we got 3 feeders, which will take one of these 50-pound sacks each. So that's a quick look at what it takes to feed all the fish and wildlife in 1 week. All right, I just put some deer crack in here, and I see why it's called that. It's a mixture of soybeans, corn, protein pellets, and some sort of sweet substance because it smells pretty incredible. But I get worried every time I come over here because these little guys. They make for a bad day if you mess with them. Alright, let's head over to Bonnie's Bayou, and we got the eagle trotting out of the pond after taking a bath. We also have a doe stopping by to take a sip of water at night, and then the eagle back the next morning to stir things up. Hey, here we got Gus Gus the mouse, a long way from home, and he's coming back down. But not too much activity in the squirrel house this week. We got Chip stopping by to inspect everything. And then Gus Gus coming back home after a long day of exploring the swamp. Alright, we put out one of those protein mixtures. Let's see what comes out tonight to eat. First up, Mr. Buck Deer and the raccoon. And then the little family of raccoons with the 2 babies. And one of the little guys not sure what to think about the deer in the daytime. And the big boy bachelor pad coming through at night. Still got velvet on the antlers. There's some close-up shots of them. They must be enjoying that protein. And that's a nice deer for this far down south. The bucks don't get big like they do in a lot of other places in the country. Now, I'd say our raccoon family is growing. Man, that's the most raccoons I've ever seen out here at once. You know there's going to be a fight. There it is. And some young deer coming in the next afternoon. Something spooked the little baby raccoon. And now everybody's finally getting along. And there's one of our favorite deer, the one we call Flip Flop. Always got those ears peeled back. Alright, if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along with all of our ponds, wildlife, and aggressive tiger bass. But I hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.